8 because, can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, and it says understand why organizations budget. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, so this chapter is about budgeting. The first thing you'll want to know, and it's on your Learn Smart, and I believe you have a quiz or a test question. Maybe it's a test question now that I think about it, not a quiz question, for the definition of budgeting. It's a detailed quantitative, so basically it means the company puts their goals or their plan into numbers, right? And we've all seen budgets before, or we've hopefully dealt with one, or maybe even created one personally, right? Of what you want to spend or what you want to acquire. So it's really that quantitative plan, the numerical plan, right? So the next, in a couple of slides before I get there, it's going to say kind of how do they use their budgets. And we've talked about this in chapter 1, that managers will plan, and then they will implement a plan, and then they will look back and see if the plan worked. So the reason I stop here is because you will actually use this concept for the next 2 chapters. Chapters 9 will be about how the company creates the plan or their budget and updates it. And then chapter 10 will be about looking back and seeing if their budget actually matched or, you know, didn't match what their goals were in all reality. Like if they saved the money they wanted to save, or if they overspent or underspent. So this chapter introduces budgets, and it will give you, I think there's like 10 basic budgets that most companies that are manufacturing a product use. So we will introduce those and we will work on creating them, but they're not too bad. So you plan with your budget, and then you really do your work, and then you look back and control and say, did the budget work? Why or why not? This is also a good slide to either screenshot or to memorize these 6 things. Your budgets help you do these 6 items. Defining goals, I think you kind of know that. And again, personal life, maybe you've used a budget to say, here's how much money I want to save, or here's what I only want to spend this much money on buying new clothes, Tal. That's my problem. It helps you think about your future. And so maybe just not a short-term goal, but a long-term. Maybe you want to have a certain amount of debt paid off, or you want to have a house purchased within, 10 years or whatever. So helps them plan for the future. Allocating their resources is really going to go hand in hand with the one that's kind of opposite of it, that says coordinate activities. So if you had a certain amount of money that you were given, and you, let's say you had $20,000, and you decided, well, I need to fix my roof, I need to fix my car, I need to save $5,000. So it basically helps you decide, either percent-wise or dollar figure-wise, how you're going to split up that money, right? That money coming in. And then coordinating activities has to do with prioritizing in a business, which one's the most important. Uncovering bottlenecks is talking about finding problems in your budget. And here's a huge problem for most businesses. They have to have enough money coming in to cover all of their expenses, right? That happens even in your own personal life. One huge problem or bottleneck talks about where your procedures come to a halt because of a problem, because of an issue. It could be because you don't have enough raw materials on hand to produce all the units. You need to order more and store more raw materials. But it could be because there's not enough hours in the day. That's the problem with like our homework, right? In our life is there's not enough hours in the day budgeted to get everything done that you want to get done, maybe. So the bottlenecks are the issues that you come up with when you set out that plan that you will find and discover. And then communicating your plan, definitely for a business, you tell departments how much they can and can't spend according to their budget or what their sales goals are. And maybe you guys have experienced that. Yes, no, maybe sales goals in your business.
Yeah.
Yeah. whenever I worked at a shoe store one time, and they had these, number of shoes you were supposed to sell every time you came to work, whatever the goal was, or for the week or for the month. And then they'd have these like upsells, or they'd have how many times can you get people to take advantage of your company credit card, right? So they would communicate that stuff to us. Everybody would be on a chart, and I would never meet those goals because I am a sucky salesperson. But they told me what I was supposed to do. I just didn't do it. So this is pretty self-explanatory, and it talks about you should really only be held accountable for things that you can control. The responsibility accounting says, if I'm in charge of the accounting department, I should be responsible for their budget. I'm not responsible for human resources budget or for the advertising budget, right? I have to be in control. I have to be held accountable for only things that I have influence over, that I could change. The next slide is going to talk about the continuous budget, and it just means every budget is set up for 12 months. So if I set my budget up from January to December for 2020, and then January is over, if it is now February 1st, a 12-month budget would run from February 1st of 2020 all the way through January 31st of 2021, right? It's always encompassing 12 months. It's like when one month falls off at the beginning of the front, you add one to the end. So it always has 12 months in it, is what it means by that continuous budget. And then the fiscal year, you probably already know this, but it doesn't talk, it's not always according to the calendar year of January 1 to December 31st. It does always include 12 months, but some companies, their fiscal year starts maybe on July 1st, and it runs all the way to June 30th of the next year. It's encompassing 12 months, but their fiscal year is talking about how they create their financial data according to what 12-month period. Self-imposed budgets are things that should be created from the bottom up. So I like to think of it like this. If my husband told me to go on a diet, I would be like, screw you, I'm not going to lose any lbs. But if I said to myself, hey, it would be healthier if you would eat more salad and drink more water, right? I am more likely to participate in that. I have some input in it if I were to say, this is what I want to do with my diet, instead of somebody telling me what I had to do, right? So that's the point of this self-imposed budget. If you will actually gather feedback from employees, even frontline people, I know it says supervisors, but people that are actually dealing with the budget, if you will get their input, they will more likely cooperate. And that's a general concept for anything in life, right? Like even raising your kids. If you ask them and let them have input on a decision, they're more likely to abide by those rules that you set up. Sometimes you just have to be a dictator, but you know what I mean. So I'm not going to test you over this, but it does talk about, I'll go back for a second, what are some, and they're obvious things, advantages to that self-imposed budget. But I do like this one slide that talks about right here, your budgets. Though, if I were to ask my students for them to come up with the standards of our class, what might some of the students, if I said, hey, you guys get to decide how I report your grades or how your grades are calculated, what might they say sometimes?
Like give us all A's?
Yeah, they might just say, okay, really, there's no standard. Give us all A's, or every time we come to class, we get 1,000 points or something. We don't have to do any homework. So sometimes when you ask for feedback, people are going to have what this calls too much budgetary slack. They're going to make it too loose, right? The rules aren't going to be effective if they're not realistic. But then also, I say your budgets should be like your pants. And they shouldn't be too loose that they're falling down, right? But they shouldn't be so tight that they're showing all your junk, because both ways are not effective. I mean, you can't go extremes. When a budget is really, really tight, people get upset and they say, well, we can't really function if we can't spend any money on things, or you set really unrealistic sales goals, right? So the budget has to be that middle ground, not too loose and not too tight. And then the last main thing here that I wanted to talk about was this one. Let's see if I keep to my, oh, I'm right at my 10 minutes. I'm trying to be good on my time today. So whenever I first started teaching this class, I asked my students to help come up with a way to remember the order of the budgets, because I know this slide looks really kind of funky with all these arrows, but there is an order to your budgets, okay? So the first budget is always the sales budget. That's the money coming in. So it goes sales, production. Then these three things help you create your production budget. Like, what goes into your production budget? Well, I have to have materials, labor, and overhead, right? We learned that in every chapter. Those are the three main things. So really, it starts with an S, and then it's a P. I'll put this on my whiteboard in a second. And then it goes to these D's down here. So here's what they came up with. They said, stupid people do drugs, meth, crack, shrooms, cocaine is BS. I know, you guys are excited to memorize that, aren't you? Really, you don't have to memorize it, because that's the last slide we're going to stop at. But it really says the money coming in, stupid for S, sales, has to be the first thing that I look at. Do I have enough money coming in? Have I set my sales goals realistically? Well, if I'm going to sell, let's just say I plan to sell 1,000 units. What must I have? I must have already at least produced 1,000 units, right? If I'm going to sell a product, I need to have made that product. So that's what this next budget here says, the production budget, right? What do you need to produce your units? You need material, labor, and overhead. And then it talks about what other cost might you incur? Well, you might incur this box here, selling and administrative cost, right? This one over here, the ending inventory, says if you didn't sell it, it should be left in your inventory. So let's look at, let's get out of this slide. All right, so the first budget is the sales budget. That will typically, I think actually on all of your homework problems, that'll be a given item. But if you were to have to create the sales budget, it would basically just say, how many units do you plan to sell, which is given here on my spreadsheet. I'm going to make it larger. Maybe not. Go back to that tile. How many units do you have to sell, and how much are you selling each one for? So is it hard to see? Does it look really far away? No?
No.
Okay, okay. So this is all given in your data. If you flip to, I'm going to make a note of this, question 9 on the homework, this is exactly where I pulled this from. My numbers are different, right? But it says in July, they plan to sell 45,000 units. In August, 50,000, September, 60,000, 40,000, 30,000, 20,000. So those are their sales goals, right? Well, the next budget after the sales budget is the production budget. So that's what it's going to ask you to create. So right down here, I'm going to put this right here. This is what will be on requirement 1. I'm just going to highlight it like that for now. So it'll be all empty, except on the far left here, that budgeted sales word would already be, title would already be there for you, okay? This one I highlighted, and I'm going to post this Excel spreadsheet, is a drop down that you have to pick. But a lot of students mess that up because there is one that looks very similar on the drop down. Right now, I am adding the desired ending finished goods. Don't select to add the ending raw materials. You have to select add desired ending finished goods. So really what it says is if you plan to sell 45,000 units, you need to have produced at least that much or have that much on hand. What you're doing with this budget here is you're saying, okay, if I'm going to sell 45,000 units, how many units do I need to produce in the month of July? Well, there's two issues. When we order something, like I order something from Amazon as a customer, what do I expect? usually. What am I thinking? Once I hit order, I'm thinking, I'm going to get that product when?
In 2 days.
Like 2 days or less, right? Like, I mean, everything I buy is pretty much Prime, because if I pay for that membership, I should be utilizing it, I think. So if I order something, I want it basically now, right? And so if I am a company that produces a product, I better get a jump on next month's production, is kind of what it says. It's like if you're doing your homework and you already have chapter 8 done, and you're like, I know chapter 9 isn't due until next week, but I'm going to get a jump on it, right? So what they do in the formula is they say, okay, first you type in the number of units that you plan to sell. So that 45,000 there on the July box just came from the problem. Here's July, and I take the number I plan to sell and I type it in the box. But this next box below it says, okay, if I were to sell all 45,000 units, I need to produce some of next month's already during July. I need to get a jump on August production. So in your problem, it will tell you how much. This is the line I need to look at. It says, at the end of July, essentially, at the end of the month, I want to already have 4,000 units on hand. Plus, I want to have 25% of next month produced. So if you look at this box here, the 16,500, the way it was calculated is it says, I need to take 25%. I'm going to put this in my calculator here. I need to take 25% of 50,000 is 12,500 plus 4,000. That's where that 16.5 in purple came from right there. And the way I have this spreadsheet set up is you can just replace from your homework these color-coded numbers. So like if your homework said it wanted the desired ending inventory to be 1,000 units plus 10% of next month's sales, you would replace this box right here. And I'll put that on the directions. You would replace this box right here, and you will replace this box from your data. And then it will fill in all these ones down here that I have pre-calculated for you, okay? So the next part of the spreadsheet says you just add together what you plan to sell for July and your desired ending inventory. So this box here was me just adding down. I have it already calculated in there. See how 45,000 plus 16,500 is the 61,500? And then the next column says you're going to, or not column, but box, says you're going to subtract anything that you had left over from last month. So last month, in my problem, it says at the end of June, I had 15,250 already created. So that box gets subtracted. It's like, let's use smaller numbers, okay? Let's say we plan to sell 10 units. Well, at the end of the month, I still want to have, let's say, 2 units left over. I would really need to produce 12, right? I plan to sell 10. I want to have 2 left over at the end of the month. I need to produce 12. But we already started the month with 4 already in our inventory. So if I plan to sell 10 and I want 2 left over, that's 12. But I already had 4. I really only need to produce 8. Does that make sense? Is what this formula says. It just has big numbers. So I went ahead and filled it. Do you see that these top lines all came from the problem? I just typed them in. There's no calculation on that first line. All you got to do on the homework on that first line is type it in. The next line, the 19, or I should say, yeah, row. The 19,000 here came from 25% of next month, 25% of 60, plus 4,000. This 14 came from 25% of 40, which we know is 10, right? We can do that math in our head, 25% of 40, plus 4,000. This 11.5, I don't have it on here, but it comes from looking up at November. If you look at November, it was 30,000. So I take 25% of 30,000 and I add 4,000 to it. This row is just me adding the two numbers above it together. You can easily see it on August because 50 and 19 is 69. You can easily see it on September. 60 and 14 is 74, right? This next row, I love this next row, okay? Because I color coded it. That's why I love it. This end of July is actually the beginning of August. So those two numbers should always coordinate. See how that 16,500 is there and it's also down here. What is the end of August is the beginning of September. What is the end of September is the beginning of October. Those were the ones you already had left over from last month. What questions you got about that chart?
I mean, I think I'll have to go back and watch this video again when I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Me too.
It's confusing the first time you see it, but after, I promise you girls, after you practice it, like you're gonna have it on question 1 and 2, and they'll also have hints on there. It will seem like really easy and straightforward. It's mainly because guess what? If you got the first column, you're doing the exact same pattern on the second column. And you're doing the exact same pattern on the third column and the fourth column. So the top line is always given, the sales you plan to sell, the units you plan to sell, budgeted sales. The second line is always a percentage of next month, right? It said in my problem, it was supposed to be, because I want to get a jump on next month. But the thing they made funky on this problem is they made you add the extra 4,000 units. Hey, guess what? We get to practice it again. What? So remember I said sales is the first one, production is the second one. The next budget is a direct material budget, because if I'm going to produce 46,000 units, 46,250 in July, I better have enough raw materials on hand to produce that many units, right? So this budget says, how many raw materials do you plan to purchase, to buy? So I would burn a check my work if I was you guys, if I were you on the question 9. If when I get this first requirement done, I would check it. If I think it's all good on requirement 1, because this down here on my spreadsheet is requirement 2. And so all of these numbers at the bottom here on requirement 1 become the first line of requirement 2. You see how they coordinate that? What I plan to produce in July is 46,250. That's what I will type into the first box on requirement 2. This next box, here's what's tricky. I'm going to show you something, and I don't know if I can get over there to it or not. Can you see my paint picture here now? This time?
Yes.
Okay. So on question 9, this is how it reads. This is the top part of it, okay? This is where you find the 3 that I typed in. And so it's hiding to students because it shows up as a word instead of as a number. So yours might say 2, yours might say 5, yours might say 6, but it's going to be the second sentence, the first word on question 9, okay? So back to that spreadsheet. After I find that 3 on my problem, and again, yours might say 2 or 4, I type it in. This next row below the 3 is multiplying. It's saying if I produce 46,250 units and each of them needs 3 centimeters of raw materials, then you're actually going to need 138,750 raw materials. So again, on this spreadsheet, it is set up where you will just need to plug in the top row and then the second row from your homework. And then the third row I have on the spreadsheet as a formula. So it will do the math for you on the spreadsheet if you just update the top 2 rows, okay? The third row, you're gonna have to update from your problem down here. See, I typed it. Here's what you need to update. Is yours 3 centimeters or is it 2, and then what is your percent of next month? So mine said 50% on my problem. It said they want to get a jump on next month. And remember, we take that 50% and we multiply it by, if I look at this, or can you see the formula at the top where it says B31 times D24? Okay. It is taking the 50% down here and it's multiplying it by next month. Now here's the trick. Not by the top of the column on August. I want to have 50% of next month's raw materials. So here's the calculation for raw materials, right? I want to have 50% of that number. See, that number box is D24. So if I look at my formula, it's saying take 50% of next month's raw materials. Don't take 50% of next month's units. The top row is units. The third row down is raw materials. Okay, then I just add the number of units I desire to have at the end of raw materials with the number of units I plan to use in production. And I'm going to subtract. This is a given number. You can see the 69,375. It is actually given in your homework. And so I will flip back over there. No, maybe not work. Nope, didn't work, did it? Can you see the paint screen again?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
So on the problem, it's going to tell you on line B what your June 30th, it's right here. I can't get it to highlight. I'm not really in the paint, but that is given in the problem. Okay. And I will ask you to update that on the spreadsheet when you.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to say about this spreadsheet, I know it's kind of confusing, is the column here for the third quarter. Okay. The top row is just to add across. You see how this is almost 50, that's about 50, that's about 50. So this is 150-ish thousand. But this item right here, I'm going to highlight it. Let's highlight it in blue. It is talking about the end of the quarter. You're going to need to know this on a couple other homework questions. So that 56,250 came from there because the end of this quarter is September. Remember, quarters run as 3 months. So like the end of the first quarter would be January, February, March. The end of the first quarter would be March. January, February, March, April, May, June. So the end of the second quarter would be June. The end of the third quarter, July, August, September. This number down here for the beginning of the quarter actually came from July. See that number right there? And that was given in your problem. The end of June is the same thing as the beginning of July. Super confused or okay?
I think I'll be okay once I actually do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I will be too.
Okay. I think, yes. This is number 9. So if I were you, I would probably start at the beginning of the homework because it has hints and it will walk you through a couple of these, but this was one without a hint. So that's why I wanted to talk about it today.
Okay.
The only other thing I was going to show you was the question 10. It does have a hint, but it's a little bit confusing. And so I made a spreadsheet on it. What it is talking about is the cash budget. Remember, we start with the sales budget, we do a production budget, and then we do materials, labor, and overhead. And then you're going to do selling, and then there's a cash budget. Because the sales budget represents money coming in. All of the other budgets represent money going out. If I have to pay for raw materials, I have to pay for labor, I have to pay for selling cost, right? So once you've done all of those budgets about money coming in and going out, then you can say, okay, did the money coming in exceed the money I plan to spend, right, on the cash budget? So this budget helps you figure out if you were to sell your product on account. Remember what that means if you sell it on account?
You should.
So if I sell it on account, it really means I give my product to somebody and they don't pay me cash right away, right? I set up an accounts receivable. So You're going to have to read in your problem. And again, I have set this up. Hopefully this won't be confusing, but you could put your percents in here from your homework, these color-coded numbers that I have. If you update those cells, and I'll tell you that on the on Canvas, I'll say update cell, blah, 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 blah. If you update those cells, it should fill in this chart for you. So what it says is I plan to sell $420,000 worth of product in April. But only 20% of the people that buy my product in April will actually pay me cash in April. 65% on my problem will pay me the month after April. So the month after April is May. And then 15% would pay me in June. So those 3 percentages add up to 100 for everybody. It's saying, I'm going to collect this whole $420,000, but I'm going to collect it over a period of 3 months, right? I'm going to get 20% of it in April. So if you look down here on my spreadsheet, it would say that I'm going to get 20% of 420 in April. When am I going to collect that money? I'm going to get 20% in April. So you can see 2 times 42 is the 84. I'm going to get 65% of that money in May, and I'm going to get 15% in June, a whole total of 420. That is the only one that will show up in its entirety on this chart, because this chart is really saying, when do you collect the money? So I actually, for May, I would only collect, there's going to be nothing in this box for April, because I don't go back in time and collect money from May sales, right? May sales don't happen until the month of May. So if I look at the chart, really it's going to say I get 20% of May in May. I get 65% in June. And then over here, you'll see that 15% of it isn't actually collected until July. That 93, that's the amount of the May sales that are not collected as of June 30th. It will be collected in July. And that's actually going to be part of your answer to requirement 2 on this problem. But this one does have a hint. So if you want to just watch the hint, that will help too. I'm going to go ahead and highlight the rest of this chart to show you how it looks. So there's nothing in this box for May or June on the top, because what it is saying is you had $350,000 worth of sales in February. You would have collected 20% of that in February, right? Then you would have collected 65% in March. So this chart is only asking about what did you collect in in April and May and June. I, in theory, would have collected all of the money already from the February sales by the time the month of April is over. So June is another good example of that, how some numbers aren't going to show up, but you would, in theory, eventually collect all that money. It's just not on this chart, because this chart is only talking about April, May, and June.
Okay. I got it.
Got it?
Yes.
Okay. It's a lot to take in from those 2 examples, but like I said, all the other ones have hints, and 10 does have a hint. This is question 10, but it just is not, it's kind of difficult even with the hint to get the concept. Yeah.
I feel like it will definitely make sense with this video, like going back and looking at it on the chart once I'm actually doing it. I think that will really help.